And they were talking about the number of people homeless in Auckland, because this is where the New Zealand was done, it's just in Auckland. Number of homeless people in the streets in Auckland, and you think, okay, that's pretty shocking. And then they go through the others, and you get to America, and it's massive quantity of the numbers. It's a three-figure number of homeless people just in New York itself, right? And all they do is they move them on from place to place. So the people are quite often lying on the street or whatever, and they might not be causing a major problem, but the police move them on, tell them to move on. Well, these people haven't got anywhere to go. They haven't got a home to go to. They haven't got anything to go to. But instead of the police saying, well, look, here, come down to the shelter, well, there's this place you can go to, they just say, bugger off. So they're moving from one place to another. A few hours later, they might stumble across them in a different location and move them on from there. They're not actually doing anything about it. But you also don't see that in your average media either. It's only in this documentary because they're specifically looking at what police in the different countries.
That's got to be independent media too, it won't be mainstream media.
No, well, you never see. For instance, you take this thing recently. We had this gas explosion in Auckland, right? There's nothing there of how many say homeless people it might have been in the area. Okay, in New Zealand the likelihood's pretty slim, but the same thing in America. There's been different incidences. You take the whole 9/11. There was no mention there of how many homeless people got killed in 9/11. There's a focus on the people who are in the tower and the firefighters and all that. That's fine, but no mention of the people who were in that location because they didn't have a home to go to in the street, sleeping on the streets when it all went down.
I know firefighters and professionals are still fighting for funds, for what they went through in 9/11 today, 10 years later. I also know that the families of workers in the buildings that were killed never received compensation for their family members being killed, like janitors and people like that. Whatever happened to all the money that the public donated is a mystery.
Well, yes, that's got me concerned about the whole Christchurch thing. See, again, back to the homeless people. Where's the coverage of how many homeless people got killed in that Christchurch earthquake, right? Or injured?
Well, there was a list in the papers of people who had been killed in the earthquake.
Yeah, but they've made an issue about. They've focused on workers and people who work in the area and the big business and that sort of thing. No mention of homeless people who had a building fall on top of them just because they had to sleep up against the side of the building, for instance. And now, there's been all this thing about donating to the Christchurch appeal and all this sort of thing, but there hasn't been any evidence of what's happened to this money. We should be seeing some sort of balance sheet on how much of it's going for infrastructure, how much of it's going for rebuilding Christchurch, how much of it's going into the pockets of pen pushers and people in offices to make decisions and create red tape. And we know, for instance, that getting building consents is a major nightmare for anyone. There's quite a bit of red tape, and the council's got to be difficult about it. Well, how much of this money that's supposedly being given is going back into the pockets of the council for dealing with building consents? Right. I've got no problem with people having to pay to get a building consent normally, but in the case of rebuilding Christchurch, shouldn't they be doing something to reduce the cost of that or whatever? How much other money is going into the pockets of actual council workers who are doing stuff, rather than, there was a piece on a while back about a couple of different streets in particular who were getting told by building inspectors that their house was safe to use, and then being told by insurance companies it's not, or the other way around, being told it's not safe, but then the insurance company saying, we're not going to pay out until an investigation's done. So here you've got the council building inspector saying it's not safe, but then saying, even though there's a decision on that, then the insurance company comes in and says, before we make any decisions, we're going to do our own investigation. Which is just wrong. If the council says it's unsafe or makes a decision, it's like if the police investigate a crime and find someone is not guilty of having burnt down their own home, then there should be no need for the insurance company to come along and do their own investigation into how the fire started.
Well, one of the major factors that really hurt the business community in the Christchurch earthquake was that they weren't allowed into their offices to retrieve their belongings, their materials, their documents, their papers that were important to them for their business. But the government let the IRD workers, staff, into the offices to retrieve public information so that the files wouldn't be lost to all the taxpayers. And that was
that's just wrong. Yeah, the same rules should apply to each group. Be it the government departments or non-government departments should have to stick to the same criteria. But the biggest problem here has been the fact that people aren't able to rebuild their homes because they aren't being given the money that they're supposed to be given to do the rebuilding. Right? The council are running around supposedly rebuilding council buildings. But what about the people in the suburbs where their house needs whatever construction done to it, and it's we can't do it till we get the payout, and they're not getting that money.
Well, I mean, if you want to make comparisons to the situation, you just have to look at the golf spill where BP paid out X amount of millions of dollars, but only so much of it has been, because they say, well, only so much has been claimed, so we're stopping claims, and it was only a fraction of what was given out. But if you look at places like the Mississippi Delta, where people live in abject poverty in hovels, they could have been able to claim for housing. They should have been able to use that money to build whole new areas of housing in the Mississippi Delta, where people, if you go to places like Watts and Compton, and they are called the lowest of society in Los Angeles, and if you look in those suburbs, they look like beautiful suburbs compared to what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be the lowest of the lows in Los Angeles, and they're very attractive looking areas. I've seen them. But you go to the Mississippi Delta, that was directly affected by the oil spill. It's just one big hovel. It looks terrible. And all that should have been, with all that money that BP paid out, they could have invested in a whole lot of new housing for those people. And they deserve it. They should have got it.
Yeah, it's. So I don't know much about Japan, but I suspect Japan are a little bit more organised with these things and that sort of thing. But again, it seems to be this problem that we're convinced to give donations to these various disaster relief causes, right? But we're not being given back the information as to how that's helped someone. Personally, I wouldn't give to a disaster relief thing unless I knew something good was happening with that, it was going to where it's supposed to. I'd rather help someone direct. I've got family that were involved in that. Fortunately, they don't need any real help. But if they had and I was able to, then fine. But I'm not saying people shouldn't give, but I think the public should demand an explanation of what's happened to their money when you're giving it like that. They make a big issue about demanding what happens to our taxes regarding beneficiaries, right? And beneficiaries being responsible for that and showing that they absolutely deserve it and all this to carry on. But when it comes to disaster relief, there's no demand that the people who are collecting that money show where that money is going. Which is wrong. That sort of thing needs to be sorted. But anyway, that was a chat.
Awesome.